And here now to discuss all of this is California Congressman Adam Schiff. He joins us via Skype from Washington, D.C. Good to have you back on the program.
Thank you. It's great to be with you.
Well, we'll get to the Russia investigation in a moment, but first I wanted to ask you about the looming government shutdown. You voted against the stopgap spending resolution in the House. Why did you do that?
Some months ago, the president created a crisis for hundreds of thousands of young people, the Dreamers, basically by revoking the DACA program, but promised to fix it. And now the Republicans are proposing to continue in the spending bill to leave that unaddressed and leave these young people's lives hanging by a thread. I'm not willing to do that, not willing to pass the CR and go home and say, we'll just worry about this another day. There ought to be plenty of room for bipartisan agreement on this. We also need to reauthorize the children's health care program, and I think it's irresponsible to essentially either shut down the government or, frankly, pass another funding bill that leaves these major populations vulnerable in this problem unaddressed.
But, you know, the last time there was a government shutdown back in 2013 and Republicans voted for that, the Democrats charged that Congress should not be held hostage to the concept of using policy debates as leverage in terms of trying to keep the government funded and open. And now it seems like the Democrats are doing that exact same thing. So how do you respond to that?
This is a hostage situation that was frankly created by the president when he decided he was going to repeal DACA and set the clock ticking. And now it's gotten to the point where these Dreamers are months or weeks away from being sent to countries potentially that they have no memory of ever having lived in. And at the end of the day, you have to say, we need to deal with this. We can't just keep kicking the can down the road and keeping these young people's lives in such jeopardy. The children's health care program, you could make the same point with. It's been 111 days since that program expired, and the majority is simply unwilling to deal with it unless we force them to. They have a responsibility to govern, and if they can't do that, then they ought to just get out of the way and let someone else do it.
On the Russia investigation, you're the ranking Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee. Steve Bannon was supposed to testify before the committee on Thursday after being subpoenaed, but now your panel is giving him an extension. Why are you doing that?
It's not with our recommendation. The majority is doing this in a unilateral way. We want him back before the committee. We want him to answer those questions. And it's not Steve Bannon alone. We also had Corey Lewandowski, the campaign manager for a time of the Trump campaign. He came in. He didn't even give an excuse that the White House was instructing him not to answer questions. He just said, I'm not going to do it, not prepared to do it. And the majority let him get away with it and said, well, why don't you come back another day when you feel like answering questions? But it also sets a precedent for the future that the Congress can be run over by the White House when the party in power is the same party in the majority.
How concerned are you that the White House will try to exert executive privilege over this and Bannon won't be saying anything at all?
There is no basis to say executive privilege covers any meetings, conversations, etc. during the transition. There's no precedent for that at all. And there's no precedent for saying there's such a blanket executive privilege even when somebody was in the administration. And they're further applying it even when he left the administration to certain conversations. So if this goes to court, they will lose, and they will lose big. Now, I don't think they're going to want to do that. What concerns me at this point is they will propose, we'll answer these questions, but we won't answer those. And the majority, which has essentially had their back, will be willing to say, that's fine with us.
What are some of the key questions that you had for Steve Bannon the first time around that he refused to answer?
Mr. Bannon was quoted in the book Fire and Fury talking about the meeting at Trump Tower being treasonous and unpatriotic. He was quite convinced that there was a follow-up discussion or meeting between the Russians and Mr. Trump. And he's had, obviously, a lot of interactions with the administration and those in the White House since this story broke. Mr. Bannon could shed a lot of light on the issue of obstruction of justice, but also on the issue of potential collusion.
Congressman Schiff, President Trump has been in office for a year now. How would you assess his first year in office?
You know, I've been saying over the course of the year that I'm running out of adjectives and expletives. It's been, I think, a really disastrous year for our democracy, far beyond what the Russians were capable of doing to us. We see the administration doing to our own system of checks and balances. Attacking the free press as the enemy of the people, undermining the independence of the Justice Department, belittling federal judges, calling them only so-called judges, judges in name only. They rule against the administration. We've seen a real erosion of the checks that were put in place by the founders. So hard to find much of a silver lining this year. I have to hope that things will improve in the future, but it will largely depend on the Congress's willingness to stand up to the worst impulses of this administration.
What should Democrats do to work better with the White House and the Republican leadership?
I think the primary challenge for the Democratic Party is really the same challenge for the Republican Party, and that is to address these profound economic challenges that are going on. Automation poses the same danger to retail jobs as globalization posed to manufacturing jobs. And that is a lot of retail establishments we're already seeing are going out of business because of the tremendous growth of services like Amazon. That trend is going to continue, and it will be hugely disruptive. Now, I don't think you could stop automation. You can't pass a law saying we shouldn't have automation, and it brings a lot of benefits too. But it doesn't mean that we need to respond. We need to figure out, okay, how do we make this economy work for more Americans?
And as you look ahead to the second year, what worries you the most?
Well, I would say a couple things. In dramatic fashion, this president has remade the Republican Party in his image, in his deeply flawed image. And these attacks on our institutions are continuing. The attacks on the press are now being amplified around the world. Dictators around the world are citing President Trump to dismiss reports of their own corruption. But I'm also worried that some of the profound economic challenges the country faces are not being addressed. The stock market is doing great, but for people who aren't in the market, they're still struggling. And the twin forces of automation and globalization are going to bring about dramatic changes in our economy that we need to address and be prepared for and help people get good, meaningful work and keep it.
All right. Well, Congressman Adam, we always appreciate your time. Thank